can't find another job,
I'm
then
sorry.
is what it is.
Are you comparing people to? It's not attainable for everybody to get those cheaper, or not cheaper, I'm sorry, those replacements for calcium and protein and all that stuff. And so just eating meat and eating dairy products is a lot easier for them instead of going vegan.
It's not easy for people, you're saying, so for some people to get these things, but then you've got to kind of weigh it up and say, okay, who has it harder? Do I have a more difficult life trying to find plant-based products, or do the animals have a more difficult life going through this system and eventually, having their throats slit? Who has the harder life here? And of course, I mean, I would hope, unless someone is really kind of, the most selfish person in the world, I would hope the majority of people would say, well, actually, my difficulty is trying to find plant-based products, or maybe supplements, buying supplements online, or, going an extra 10 or 15 minutes to go and find that product. Maybe those things are not as difficult as what an animal goes through if I just take the easy option and buy the meat.
I guess, I mean, it is the easy option, but that's the only thing that a lot of people can have. Like, as I said, where I live, it's not the best. There's people that work 2 jobs and have like 3, 4, 5 kids. And so they can't all buy a bunch of tofu and almond milk for them because that's just not accessible here. But it's also not cheap enough. They can buy enough like carne asada or chicken or something for their kids, and that can last them like the whole week. And it costs them 2-3 times more to buy like enough tofu or meat supplement.
Yeah,
it's just,
those things are expensive. Tofu and meat alternative, like literally vegan meats, are expensive, but you can not eat those things. There are other ways to get protein and calcium and all the nutrition you'd need that are significantly cheaper than animal products. Like these products, I think you're thinking vegan products. A lot of people do this actually. They think vegan products means vegan cheese, vegan meat, vegan milks. It really doesn't. It means whole grains. It means lentils. It means chickpeas and beans and pasta and rice. And there's all these foods that have been eaten by humans for a very, very long time that are the staple foods for a lot of people in the world. And if you go to the supermarket, 9 times out of 10, these are the cheapest foods that you can buy. You can buy like 3 kilo bags of lentils, dried lentils, that you can cook at home. You can buy, dried beans. These are always the cheapest foods. Not always, but in most supermarkets across the world, they're the cheapest foods, far cheaper than any plant, animal-based products. And I'm not saying it's the easiest thing for some people. Like, yeah, if you're a single parent of 5 kids or whatever, I mean, you're in a tough position as it is, right? Clearly, if single parent, 5 kids, that's not going to be very easy for anyone. But with some practice and with some knowledge, as I said, with like a website like challenge22.com, and with getting into a new routine, a new rhythm, it is totally possible. And I speak from experience here, not just from I'm just guessing. Like my mum is a single mum, and she raised all 3 of us vegetarian at first and then vegan. And also she doesn't have it easy because my youngest brother is also has learning difficulties and autism, and she's his full-time carer. So she's basically looking after a differently abled kid, and then me and my younger brother, and managed to do it all on government welfare and, vegan. So I know this, it's anecdotal. It's just a story from my family, and it's not the same for everyone. I get it. What I'm saying is, though, if you really, really care and don't want to do this to animals, like you see that these animals don't deserve what they're going through, then, well, yeah, you can do it. It can be done. It can be done. And for sure, some people are going to struggle, but the struggle's worth it.
How will you, I guess, your plan of switching us from a meat-eating society to a vegan society affect the economy? So I guess like the jobs from it and all that stuff, and and also the environment. So the if we just stop eating meat, there's gonna be overpopulation of livestock. And so I guess, how do you recommend we handle that overpopulation? And and how do you think that the loss of this livestock and these all this like stuff for the meat and dairy industry, how do you think that's going to affect like issues like climate change and stuff?
Interesting. So yeah, the The livestock overpopulation, well, the only reason there are so many animals in these industries is because they're breeding them forcibly. So if every single animal farmer in the world stops breeding the animals, then that's the population of those animals isn't going to be a significant problem. And this is, you've got to take a look at how many land animals there are. It's over 60 billion a year that are being slaughtered, being killed by these people. That's an extremely large amount of animals. But if you look around, there are no animals in the streets. So then you've got to think, where are they? Well, they're in massive buildings being consistently bred and bred and bred and bred and then killed. So this system, if it comes to a halt, then it's not like 60 billion are just going to keep on appearing randomly. It's like, no, the system needs to stop breeding them into existence, and it would. In this world where everybody is vegan, there wouldn't be anyone breeding them anymore. It may be an issue of what to do with the animals. That's another question, though, right? There are many ways you could talk about that. Some people would suggest to set up some kind of systems where they go into sanctuaries. Some people would suggest that we stop them from breeding altogether and allow these breeds to go extinct, because they're not animals that ever were on the earth naturally. A cow, a pig, a sheep, a goat, a chicken that you see in a farm does not exist in nature. These are man-made animals that have health problems, and they're like selectively bred. They have been really abused and manipulated by humans. So a lot of people would argue that these animals need to go extinct for their own good, because they're just living a horrible life, even if they're free. In terms of jobs and the economy, well, I mean, the economy changes. If you take a look at, not a couple of years ago, but I don't know how old you are. If you, I can't tell by your voice, but if you remember DVDs, then yep, sure. If you remember even before that, videotape, VHS, both of those things are largely just not in use anymore, especially VHS. But then what happens to all the people that were selling videos? Well, they had to either change their jobs because, the economy's changing, or they lost them. And I don't see a difference here with animal agriculture. Nobody was getting upset or, trying to save the jobs of people in the VHS industry when DVD came, and nobody was getting upset about the people in the DVD industry when Netflix came and YouTube came. It's the same thing here. Animal farmers can switch to plant-based alternatives, and they are switching to plant-based alternatives because the plant-based market is exploding right now. So many farmers are already making that switch. There are dairy farmers that have switched to growing oats. There are meat farmers who have switched to growing mushrooms to be used in plant-based meats. And this is happening across the world. I only hope more farmers make that switch sooner rather than later, before new farmers pop up and take the business from them, because then they're going to be left with, eventually they're going to be left with no job. So it's really down to the farmers to see the change here happening and make the switch.
I can see where you're coming from with the use of the the DVD VHS to more digital stuff, but it's not really comparable to this situation, I guess, because we can adapt and learn new technologies and stuff, but you're talking about the lives of people in this. People use their jobs, and they a lot of them are barely making enough to live. So for them to have to learn new skills and all of that, it's going to be difficult. I really hope you don't take offense to this term, because I used it once before and I got a lot of hate from it. If your goal is for us to use white veganism opposed to just no meat and replacing it, so using beans and mushrooms, as you said, it really depends on what kind of system of veganism you're trying to use. Because white veganism uses the stuff sorry, my dogs are on my bed right now and it creaks.
Don't worry.
But with white veganism, it's a lot of the packaged foods, I guess. So packaged turkey, tofu and stuff like that. It really depends on the kind of veganism you're expecting the world to adopt, or at least just the country you're in. That's gonna affect the kinds of jobs, because you can go like you said, from the dairy farmers going to oats, but it's not going to be as easy to set up, to take a guy who's been milking cows all his life and collecting chicken eggs and stuff, to make him go to working in a factory to package a bunch of packaged foods, I guess.
Okay, let's first of all let's address the white elephant in the room, the white veganism thing. That does come up a lot, and it's become very popular and become like almost its own like a trend to say, you know, something is white veganism if it. I don't even know where the trend came from, to be honest with you. But I mean, you probably took some stick for it before because people don't like to be racially categorized, and whether we like it or not, calling something white something is racially categorizing what the thing is. Like if you go around saying, oh, that's black veganism in a negative way, people are going to get very upset with you. And then it should be the same thing when someone, you know, tries to say, well, this is a white thing. It's like, I can see why people get annoyed, but I understand. Without that, I understand what you're trying to say. I guess, look, there are industries that...
Real quick.
Go ahead.
What white veganism is, if you already know it, then that's fine, but just to everybody else listening, white veganism is just... Western veganism is just like a, I guess, easier way to say it. It has to do a lot more with like replacements and stuff like that. It's not really, I guess, cultural dishes. It's a whole culture thing. Like white veganism, like white vegan culture is a whole thing. You know,
if it's Western veganism,
so it's not.
If it's Western veganism,
really a racial thing.
But it is.
It's not really a racial
but
thing.
It is.
Like,
but it is.
No, it's not. It's not. It's not real. Okay.
It is. Obviously, it is.
You can think it's a racial thing.
What else is it if it's not racial? If it's like, what is it? What is it referring to then?
Western culture is built off of colonialism and imperialism and racism created by white people. So you can see it as a racial issue, but it's not. It's not being mean because white veganism is just the thing. There's nothing wrong with it. Like, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. You can obviously look for things wrong with it, but there's nothing really wrong with it.
I would say, but I would strongly advise going for maybe Western veganism then. I mean, if that's what it is basically meaning, why not just say like, oh, it's actually kind of, this feels like it's Western focused veganism. And that, I think most people would be like, oh, that's fair because, you know, in the West, a lot of it is focused on meat substitutes and stuff like that. It makes sense. But when people label something as white veganism, and you're not doing it, but most people are using it as an insult, like, oh, white vegans, then it is racially charged. And I don't know if you've noticed, there is a trend right now of putting the word white in front of something to make it bad, like denouncing something or making something bad by, whoa, it's white people bad. A lot of people are getting sick of people trying to racially divide us. Like, we don't want to be divided anymore. Like, people are sick of this. We all want to just, you know, let's discuss things without bringing a bloody racial divide into it. That's what a lot of people I'm meeting now are trying to say. Like, let's forget that and let's just talk about the things that we disagree on. And you're right, there is a focus in the West across, you know, if you look at plant-based news, for example, or other Western like vegan publications and news channels and stuff, you're right, they focus on meat alternatives and lab-based stuff, lab meat, and you know, the vegan cheeses and stuff. You're right, there is a focus on it. And in other parts of the world, veganism's less focused on that, and it's more focused on, you know, literally just plant-based foods like chickpeas and lentils. And it doesn't mean that one's bad and one's good, but it's definitely, yeah, some parts of the world are not going to be able to access plant-based alternatives like meats and cheeses and stuff like that, and other parts of the world are going to be able to access that. So your main point I wanted to get back to, your about the farmers not being able to change, and it's not, maybe you're saying it's not fair to expect them to go from a farm to another job. And look, I would just say that there are other industries that existed for a very, very, very long time. They were grossly immoral. And these industries. There's one that absolutely springs to mind when I talk about this, and I'm not going to say which one it is because people get very upset with me, but let me describe what this industry did, and you can maybe make the guess of which one I'm talking about. So this industry took other animals, let's call them in this case, and forced them to do what they wanted them to do, and sold them, traded in their lives, treated them like commodities, and did it for hundreds of years, and eventually was abolished. That word abolished should give you the idea of what I'm talking about here. Now, like, a lot of people would be like, oh my God, did you just compare that to that? This is crazy. How could he's not talking about that, is he? Well, at the end of the day, in the time that these industries were existing, the ones I'm talking about, this was normal. This wasn't something that was immoral. People accepted it and did it, and that was it. Now we look back in 2021 at what humans did in the past in these industries, and we are disgusted with them, and we say this is wrong. But back then, they didn't really care. There were people that worked in those industries for generations and generations and generations, selling and trading in lives for generations. And we could use the same logic that you've just given here. Well, how can we expect those people who've been working in that for generations and generations to suddenly up and change jobs? Well, we expect it because they were doing immoral things to others. And that's the simpleness of it. It needed to end. It was disgusting. It was immoral. It needed to be abolished. And they have to find another job, and that's it. And if they can't find another job, then is what it is.
Are you comparing people to? Are you comparing people to animals?
No, I'm not comparing people to animals. I'm comparing an industry to another industry, an industry that's currently happening now to an industry that no longer is happening.
See, but the difference is, and I was in one of these debate before, these Q&As before, and one thing that they said was they were trying to compare humans to animals. And if you're trying to compare, I suppose, like, I don't know, like pain receptors. We have pain receptors, so do animals. It's been proven. You know, if you accidentally kick your animal, they're going to yelp and they're going to run away because they got hurt.
Yeah.
We can obviously see that they have pain receptors, same as us, and they have the system to react to that and to process what that is and stuff. But I guess you can say it like why people are upset when people, typically men, call women females instead of women or girls. It's because just because we have 2 X chromosomes or we identify as a female, that doesn't mean that we should just be identified as that. You know, we should be identified as women, because the difference between a woman and a female is that a woman is a human. A woman has those special feelings and that will to do things, and you know, that stuff that makes us different from our primates and from like a cow and a chicken, which is what you're comparing people, which I'm pretty sure we can all tell you're comparing it to slavery. And
I'm talking about 2 industries. So this is rather than taking offense at or looking to take offense at something, listen to what I'm saying and pay attention to what I'm talking about. Industries. There's an industry that used to exist that operated in a very similar way to an industry that currently exists. The subject of those industries is not what I'm comparing. I'm comparing what was being done to others and showing you how people worked in it for generations and how it doesn't matter how long they worked in it. It was an immoral industry. Now, I'm telling you that this industry that we're currently in is also immoral. The animal agriculture industry is also harming others. It's doing all these things to animals, and we should make an effort to end it because of that. And the people who currently work in it, doesn't matter how long someone's done something. If what they're doing is horrible and it's hurting others, it should end. Not comparing the people that were in the slave trade to the animals that are in the animal ag. I could make that argument, but that's not the argument I'm making right now. And there's no need to get into that.
I completely understand what you're saying. I know you don't mean any harm by saying that. It's just by even making the comparison,
there's no comparison between the subjects. There's a comparison between the industries.
You're comparing the industries.
Yeah.
And the people and the animals within them.
No, I'm comparing the industries.
I was trying to say, the reason why calling a woman a female is offensive is because of how different we are than animals.
Yeah, Look. Let's be clear. I don't want you to keep strawmanning me, because you're arguing against an argument that I've not made. I've not made that argument that women are calling women females. I've not done that, and
I'm not strawmanning you, dude. I'm really, really trying to describe to you, like, just to show just a small example as to why we're different from animals.
We are different from animals, from other animals. Completely.
I'm just using this female and woman thing to just show the reason why we don't like being called female is because we're different than animals.
Okay.
And so by you comparing the current meat industry, which is very bad, and it needs so much work, and it can have so much improvement, but by comparing that to the 400 over 400 years of terrible pain and suffering and oppression that Black and African American people have gone through, and to
No, it's
say that
okay.
they're
So
even in the
let me
smallest bit comparable by comparing their industries,
let me
that's
clarify something. I wasn't
incredibly
comparing it.
insensitive.
I wasn't comparing. It doesn't matter if something is offensive if it's correct. All right. If it's offensive and
It's
correct,
not
then
correct.
okay. Well, let me explain why it is. So I wasn't comparing it to the specific transatlantic slave trade. There were many slaves before Black people, and way before. Since the dawn of humanity, humans have enslaved other humans. White, brown, Black, all different skin tones, all different people from different parts of the world have been enslaved by others, whether it was tribes enslaving tribes, or whether, excuse me, let me finish, or whether it was over in the Middle East. There was a massive slave trade in the Middle East. So I'm not specifically choosing one element of slavery and comparing it. I'm just saying for hundreds and hundreds of years, there were systems in place, some very profitable for some people, that were doing it in slavery. Romans, for example, was probably the biggest one and the most profitable one. To give you an example, if anything, I would use the Roman example because using the transatlantic slave trade is just too sensitive for most people. But the Roman slaves were a long enough time ago that no one seems to really care anymore. So we can talk about Roman slavery as the example, if that makes it easier to kind of, without it getting too emotional. Now, I'm not saying Roman slaves and non-human animals are the same. Like, that's just stupid. If someone says that, then that's just ridiculous. We're not the same. We're completely different. We have completely different life experiences. We have completely different worlds, right? There's no doubt about that. However, the system in Rome and how it worked, they were breeding people, they were enslaving people, they were manipulating people's bodies, they were making them do things for them, they were killing them when they were no longer profitable. All of those things are done right now to non-human animals. How that isn't comparable is just completely beyond me. Whether the subject is not the same, the human is not the same as the animal, but the people doing the oppressing, they are oppressing the human and the animal equally. They are oppressing them equally. Okay? The humans back then were treated the same as animals are treated now. That's why people say, don't treat me like an animal, because of the way animals are treated now. Because we say, don't treat me like an animal, because slaves were treated like animals. That's the point I'm making here. Not that they are the same, because that's a moot point. That doesn't make any sense to say they're the same. They're not.
Okay, I don't think that they're offended to be called an animal because of how they're treated now.
Because they're oppressed. Because they're seen as lower individuals. They're lower. They're inferior. No, that's why people get offended.
That's why they're offended, because they're seen, because they are less evolved than us. There's a reason why humans are the ones at the top of the, I guess, like the main power of the world, and not sloths. It's because we aren't comparable. We're not the same.
I've repeated myself multiple times that I agree with you that we're not the same. And I'm not comparing humans to animals. I'm comparing oppression to oppression.
Man, you're comparing race-based oppression that's still
Roman slavery wasn't race-based. Roman slavery was status-based. It was class-based. It was just wherever you're born. And they would enslave you. They would enslave anyone in Roman slavery. I'm not comparing race.
Compare it to Roman slavery. Had you compared it to Roman slavery, it might have been a little bit different.
I just did compare it to Roman slavery. I literally my entire argument was based on Roman slavery.
Dude, your original argument was to the slavery of Black people in America.
No, it wasn't at all. And you can, I know, obviously there's no way you can track back through this conversation, but I can, and I can absolutely guarantee you there was not one word that even mentioned the word Black, American, or transatlantic until you assumed that that's what I was talking about. I was talking about this industry in general, the slave trades. They've been existing since, if you look back to the beginning of human records, there were people trading in slaves. This is not something that only happened once in history. It happened throughout history. And now it doesn't happen in the West, but it is still happening in countries in Africa. There are still slave trades in countries in Africa. So it still continues. So look, it's not only the African American people who suffered from slavery. That's my point there. And it's not only them that we refer to whenever we talk about slavery, but I understand why it's the one that most people go to. But that wasn't the one I was making in this case. because I know how emotionally charged it is, and you don't get anywhere if you talk about that. So that's why we talk about Roman slavery instead, if we're going to talk about it.
Comparing that to any type of human slavery is still incredibly insensitive.
Well, it's insensitive, but it's accurate. So, and it is what it is.
Not really accurate.
Why isn't it accurate? Could you explain?
Because it's humans and animals,
which are different.
Just like you were.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
You're saying my straw man thing by comparing what you're saying to the women and females thing. The fact that you're comparing the suffering of humans to animals, like they're comparing the differences and what makes us not the same as animals, but they're comparing us to animals basically. And
I'm comparing the oppression to the oppression. I'm comparing the oppressors of humans to the oppressors of animals.
Can we move on from this part then? I guess we're just gonna keep going in a loop.
Sure.
So I guess the last part for my thing was how would you think that the environment gets affected by the I guess either rapid or slow change to veganism? How would you set a system of veganism into society that best helps the environment?
Yeah.
So not us, not the animals. I'm talking about the atmosphere,
yeah, sure.
the water, the ground, all that stuff, like diseases, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I think the main way it's going to help the environment in terms of like diseases is that, well, look at the situation we're in right now, and what it's done to humanity with this recent, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it on because I don't know, maybe it might get like one of those little information things, misinformation, but whatever. With the current situation most people are in, some people are in lockdown right now because of all this stuff. It's mental. So I mean, that came from humans, again, abusing animals, manipulating animals. At least that's the strongest theory. And there have been other situations and other global pandemics that have come from the same, and there will be more that come from us cramming thousands of animals together in places and using them and abusing them, and without it's going to happen. There's going to be more of these things. So in terms of the future for humanity, the environment, like how things are going to go, and disease and all that kind of stuff, the best thing we can do is stop keeping animals together in tiny little confined spaces, and that will end when animal agriculture stops. In terms of animal agriculture's impact on destruction of the planet, well, I mean, animal agriculture is wiping out, entire parts of the ocean have no life in it whatsoever, due to like overfishing, also due to pollution that's coming from these places. There are parts of the world you spoke about. I guess you seem to have a passion for, which is good, by the way, a passion to help like ethnic minorities, or spoke about African American communities in the USA are often living in places near these factory farms where they have to face barrages of shit every day, the smell of shit. Also, they spray shit all out of the places because they've got the waste, and they have to get rid of the waste from these places. And it's often African Americans and other ethnic minorities that are living in the areas where these places are because it's cheaper. So, in terms of like how that impacts them, and also impacts the environment because of the pollution, that's really important. And animal agriculture's ending would help those people as well as, help the environment in many ways. The use of fossil fuels and the CO2 and methane and all these things. But ultimately, animal agriculture is a monster contributor to all of that. Like absolutely monstrous. Some people have put out papers that have claimed it's actually 80% of the world's pollution in that sense is coming from animal agriculture, when you include all the transportation as well as the the food transportation for the animals and all this stuff. Some people say it's more like 50%, 40%. It doesn't matter. The point is that it is a lot. All right. So that would really help. It would help the planet as well, in theory, if animal agriculture stopped. So yeah, there's many reasons aside from the ethical reasons that we discussed to do it. You can only help the environment as a vegan if you are also trying to help the environment as a vegan. Like, you can be a vegan and be terrible for the environment if you do lots of horrible things for the environment. You need to make an effort. It's not just like, oh, I go vegan, now I'm great. Like, no, that's not how it works. You'd have to be eating local foods, making an effort not to contribute to the pollution, and you'd have to make efforts. It's not like you just get a free pass when you go vegan, but it can make a big significant difference.
I think you said something about animals getting clumped together in disease.
Yep.
I think so. That reminds me of the I guess how like the Black Plague was spread so easily, and like throughout Europe and stuff, and because that's and like how other diseases because of animals just being free roaming, stuff like that. So like that makes sense. Like animals can spread disease, and we can see that in stuff like tapeworms and salmonella from chicken and beef and stuff. Like what I get my original question, I guess, which I think you somewhat answered it, but I guess I'm like, would you think that a rapid change to veganism or a slow change to veganism would be best?
I don't think we could.
That's really it.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think I would look at the reality of the question. Like, could a rapid change, as in, could we rapidly get everybody to go vegan? The answer is no. It wouldn't. It couldn't happen anyway. Like, rapid meaning tomorrow. Could that be possible? No. And if it did happen, it would probably, in the short term, cause a lot of problems and a lot of suffering for a lot of animals, because all of a sudden, these animals are no longer profitable, and all the farmers have got, well, we're not going to look after them if we're not going to get paid for it. And then look at what we've got. I mean, that's a mess if it happens tomorrow, but that's never going to happen in one day. So I think the only option we have is a slow change, because it's just not possible to do any kind of rapid change. And when I say slow change, I mean as in, if you go vegan today, you're not going to be part of any kind of rapid change. Even if you went vegan this second, it might feel rapid for you, but it's still going to be a slow change overall, because you're one of 8 billion people. So I think if every person goes vegan as soon as they can, and because it will help the animals, then that's great. I don't think every single person is going to go vegan in one day, and fortunately, it's weird. It's like, fortunately that won't happen, because obviously it would be a mess, but it's also unfortunate because it's really sad that these animals are going to continue going through this for longer. But as it will happen slowly, there'll be plenty of time to figure out all of these issues that could arise with moving jobs and shutting down systems, and what to do with the animals that are remaining. We'll have a lot of time to figure all of that out as we go, I think.
Obviously, for the system that we have in place now, a lot of animals are going to need to die. Like, that's because things die. Plants die. We're gonna die.
Yeah.
It's inevitable.
Sure.
So, do you think that us using up the, I guess, meat and stuff that we have now would be best?
Let's be realistic about it. So if there's meat that's in the shelves, and there's no, I don't see any moral implication of if the animal agriculture industry ends tomorrow and there's all these animal products on the shelves and people want to eat them, that's their call at the end of the day. I don't know. You could argue about health, but at the end of the day, if they want to eat it and if they eat too much of it, make themselves sick, that's their problem. That's their decision. It doesn't harm any more animals at that moment. If you're talking about, we've got all these animals and the animal agriculture industry's ended, but we have all these animals left, you're not going to get me to say, yes, kill them, because, I value the lives of these animals, and I would hope other people do as well. And I'd hope at this point, we instead of looking to just, let's kill them and eat them, let's actually try and make the rest of the lives they've had have been horrible. They've been living as basically, commodities. Let's give them a better end to the life than they were going to have, right? Let's not send them to a slaughterhouse. Let's take them somewhere and let them just live out their days, and that be the end of it. But I also know that, I know what humans are like, and I know that probably most people are going to want to eat them. And at the end of the day, I personally would want them to be taken care of and out of that situation. But also, if people did vote and eat them, at least that would be the last time it ever happened. So it wouldn't be great for those individuals, but at least it wouldn't happen again. So, but yeah, I would hope at that point that we would have a system that would care for them and not just send them to a slaughterhouse. I would hope we'd learned by then.
So you basically asked all my questions. So I just kind of want to run down what you're saying.
Okay.
With this change from a meat-eating society to a vegan society, we, with your hope, like with your optimistic, like best plan that you have, it would be a job opportunities for the farmers and stuff, enough food and proper nutrients for people, so it wouldn't be the loss of meat won't affect us too much, and it'll be like cheap enough and accessible to everybody, and that the animals will be taken care of. That's your plan, basically.
More or less, yeah. I mean, it's very simplified.
Okay.
I mean, it sounds hopelessly optimistic when it's that simplified. The only thing I would say is I would change is that you say that the food would be available to everybody. That's not the case right now. As in, food in general is not available to everybody right now. But the poorest people in the world have the lowest consumption of animal products in the world. So, I mean, they're already kind of surviving on plant-based nutrition, and it's, for example, in places like India, where I spent a long time, there's a huge chunk of the population that is pretty much only eating plant-based foods with some dairy products, but mostly plant-based foods because of the inexpensiveness of them. So I'm confident that, yeah, with some adjustment and especially with some knowledge, making sure the knowledge gets out there, I'm confident that we could feed, especially where people can already access the food anyway. I mean, that's another problem all in itself. There are places in the world where people just don't have access to food, full stop. So I mean, this wouldn't fix those problems, but I think it would get us a little bit closer to fixing them. Yeah.
Well,
cool.
I'm done with everything I
all
have
right
to say.
Cool. Thanks for your questions.
Thank you for that conversation.